Welcome back everyone to yet another session of Home PG Tutor where we are discussing about various syllabus topics of the National Teachers Eligibility Test Ayush which have been going to conduct in this month. So communication. So this class will be majorly based on communication, which is the second section of our classes. So here communication is, it is a fundamental aspect of the human interaction. So whether it is in our personal, educational or professional context, everywhere we need an effective communication for understanding and also being understood. Okay. So here we will be learning about the fundamentals of the communication. What is the meaning of communication and what are the types of communication? All those things we will be learning here. Okay. So what is communication? Communication is a process. It is a process of sharing information. It's a process of sharing information, thoughts, ideas, emotions, and messages. All this thing, the process of the sharing of these information, ideas, emotion, messages between individuals or groups, okay, through maybe a common system of symbols, signs, or behavior, or a language. This is called as communication. So communication has different components. First is a sender, then we have receiver, and the sender sends a message and receiver receives a message, and receiver might give a feedback which is received by the sender again. Okay, so sender and receiver, feedback is there, and channel or medium is actually the way they communicate. Okay, the way the two people or a group of people communicate, the sender and receiver communicates via a medium that is called as channel. It can be language, it can be non-verbal communication, or it can be objects. Okay, through this communication occurs. The core idea of this communication is to bridge the gap. Okay, bridge the gap between two individuals or a group of individuals through clarity and understanding. Like, for example, the sender might have an idea in their mind that they have to channel to the receiver, right? So, there is a gap between the sender and receiver. So, to bridge that gap, we need a section called as communication. That is the major viewpoint of this class. Okay, so types of communication, we know it can be verbal, like we can talk and communicate. We can, next one is non-verbal, means we can do some gestures and then communicate, or through facial expression or through body postures. All those ways again we can communicate. That is non-verbal without using the voice or speech, right? Next is written communication, right? Written communication is actually we write letters, we write postcards, or we write emails or messages. All those forms of communication is called as written communication. Next, finally, visual communication is where we see and communicate, like using of images, symbols. Like in the messages we use emojis, right? It's a symbol. Then charts, graphs, then videos, okay, visual aids to convey the messages what the person has to tell the other person, right? That is called as visual communication. So we have verbal, non-verbal, written, and visual communication. Four modes or four types of communication. Coming to verbal communication, I've told it is spoken words, and it usually occurs face to face or else via phone or video context. Okay, video call, on phone call, or while Zoom meets or Google meets, or via FaceTimes, or direct one to one conversation. That can also be considered to be a verbal communication. Fine. So characteristics of verbal communication are three. We need to have a clarity. Okay, the person who speaks has to speak in a pure, proper tone, and has to have a clarity of their own understanding and what they have to communicate to the other person. Okay, that is called as clarity. Then immediate feedback. We know, because it is a face to face communication, immediately the sender receives the feedback from the receiver, right? So that is called as immediate feedback. That happens in the verbal communication. So any person who is communicating with another person immediately can receive the feedback can be again verbal, non-verbal, written, or anyways. Okay, however they want. So that is called as verbal communication. Next, coming to non-verbal communication, again that is via what? Body language, gestures, facial expression, and posture. These are four major components of non-verbal communication. And here this non-verbal communication is not as direct as the verbal. Like if I have to tell something to the other person, I can directly tell it, right? But if it is a non-verbal communication, it is usually subtle, right? It's usually subtle and not entirely understood by the other person if they do not know what they are trying to say, right? And cultural variability, variability plays an important role because, for example, in Indian, there's a Indian head bobbing or head nodding gestures, right? So these head gestures are not understood by the foreigners because they don't have that particular method of communication, non-verbal communication there. Okay, they do not have that proper way of communication. For example, if a person comes to a room in India, because of a cultural aspect, we stand up if the person is elder to us, right? But in other context, in another country, it might not occur. In another context of friends, it might not occur. So these kinds of gestures are actually, it might show respect or it might show adoration or something like that in various contexts, right? So that is cultural variability because it varies from culture to culture, right? In North India, usually people, what they do when they see the elders, they try to touch their feet and get the blessings, right? But in South India, it is not usually followed, right? So next one is supportive role to verbal cues. It sometimes we can use this non-verbal communication as such, or it can be along with the verbal speech, right? So that is why it is also considered to have a supportive role with the verbal cues. Okay, supportive role with the verbal communication. For example, in case of a job interview, whenever a person goes to a job interview, what the interviewer sees, they see the questions, if they are answered or not, and also they see the posture of the person, if they are slouching and sitting, if they are straight, and if they are emanating confidence in their posture, in their expression. So all these things are seen by the interviewer. For example, in the viva, when the questions are asked to the student, the teacher or the lecturer sees if the student is confident enough. All those things have to be seen, and that is seen via the nonverbal cues. Fine. Next one is written communication, like emails, reports, memos, and postcards or letters, etc. All these are written communication. There is one thing about written communication, there is a permanence, because written communication always provides a record, right? The messages can be read again later on. The emails can be again taken a printout and kept, or the letters can be kept, and it can be checked for any information later on. So that is what permanence is a characteristic of written communication. Next, precision, right? So this precision in written communication, it allows careful crafting of message, right? So whenever we write something, the clarity is more than when we speak, because when ideas come into our mind, we might blabber something, but when we write, we recheck. After writing, we recheck, right, and correct the mistakes or correct the context of the message. So that will reduce the misunderstanding. Precision reduces the misunderstanding. Okay, misunderstanding in the written communication. Next is delayed feedback. Unlike verbal communication, written communication may not always receive feedback. Even if it receives, it might not be immediate. That is why delayed feedback is a problem in the in the written communication, because the process of communication is delayed because of the delayed feedback, or because of the lack of immediate feedback, which is there in what, which is there in the verbal communication, right? So that is about written communication. Next important one is visual communication. Visual, I've already mentioned, it is the use of images, symbols, charts, and videos. This usually visual communication is actually to make the complex ideas simpler. Like, if instead of writing a long paragraph of email, the person can simply send a video message, right? They can simply send a video message, or they yeah, to instead of making a long ppt, they can actually send a poster presentation, right? So in case of these areas where complex ideas have to be conveyed, visual communication comes into play. Okay, the simplicity, because videos are easier to understand, right? And yeah, for example, the books are there, novels are there. Novels are actually drafted into movies, so movies are easier to understand than the no movies are easier to understand than the novels for some people. So that is why it is simple, and also it is impactful, because we are having visual clues and visual cues. It it creates a strong emotional impact. Okay, it creates a more stronger impact than any of the other communication processes, right? Next is universal appeal. See, all the languages cannot be understood by one person, but if it is visual, okay, the image is usually understood by every person irrespective of their language. So language barriers can be transcended by the visual communication. That is why broader audience will be there for visual communication in spite of their language differences or cultural barriers. This visual communication provides a universal appeal. Okay. Next one, we have to know about the characteristics of effective communication. So, effective communication should have clarity, conciseness, coherence, relevance, and feedback. So, these are the five main points of effective communication. So, sometimes it is even told to be having 7 C's of effective communication, that is confidence, coherence, conciseness, courtesy, correctness, clarity, and concreteness. These are the 7 C's of effective communication. Now, coming to each of them, we'll see. So, clarity. We have to ensure whatever we are trying to speak has a certain clarity, right? The message, whatever we are trying to convey, has to be clear, has to be unambiguous, and there should not be any misinterpretation. Like, if the person is trying to say yes, this person also has to hear or interpret it as yes only. It should not be interpreted as no. Like, that problem happens in cases of non-verbal communication, like nodding the head. If the person doesn't know what nodding means, instead of considering it yes, the other person might think it is no. Okay, that is why the cultural aspect comes into play when clarity has to be mentioned. Okay, so to maintain the clarity, we have to maintain a simple language and organize the thoughts logically. Okay, it should be logical enough so that the other person understands. Okay, and also we have to avoid jargon. For example, in medical terms, we cannot directly tell the patient that you are having a episode of myocardial infarction. So the common man might not understand what is myocardial infarction, so instead they will be more comfortable with the term heart attack, right? So that is why we should avoid jargon. The complex terminology should be avoided. Okay, unless and until if the person is familiar. If we are talking to a medical person, then we can use myocardial infarction. But when we are speaking to a common layman, we cannot use the term myocardial infarction or other complex um terminologies. Fine. Conciseness. We have to convey the message briefly. We cannot keep on talking or use lots of words to convey a single line. Right. So we should avoid the unnecessary details. Avoid unnecessary details which does not actually play any role in communicating. Right. So we should avoid unnecessary details and always maintain the meaning. Even though we are cutting off the major words, we have to have the meaningfulness has to be maintained in the sentence. Okay, so that is what the repetition has to be avoided, unnecessary details have to be avoided, and we have to be direct. Okay, direct communication has to be maintained to tell that it is effective. Okay, next important one is coherence. Actually, this um, ensures that the message is logical. Okay, it is logical and smooth. It should be logical and it should be smooth from one point to next. For example, from homeopathic point of view, we can, about lachesis, right? It jumps from one topic to another. So that there the coherence is not maintained. For example, in case of medical terminology, in case of vernix aphasia, the person might be speaking nonsense, like it does not make any sense. So such things lack coherence. But for a communication to be effective, it should be logical, smooth, and it should make sense. Okay, and the audience should find it easy to follow. Okay, so it should be organized, it should be smooth and logical, and it should have a clear middle portion, and a clear end. Then only the communication is considered to be effective. Next point is relevance. Okay, so relevance has to be maintained. So what is relevance? Relevance means actually the content of the communication is appropriate and meaningful to the audience. Okay, it should be meaningful to the audience and appropriate to the audience. Okay, for example, if we go and speak with the 10th standard students about, maybe, yeah, if we speak to the 10th standard students about complex mathematical equations which is not there in syllabus, it becomes unimportant, or it goes over the head of the students, right? So that is where the relevance matters. If the audience considers the message to be relevant, then only it will retain in their mind. Otherwise, it is, whatever we are speaking, it is actually useless. So remember, the message, whatever we are trying to say, it should address the needs, okay, interest, it should address the needs, interest and concerns of the audience. Okay, a politician, that is where the politician comes into play. The politician goes and addresses their needs, right? They address the needs of the citizens and they try to implement that in their constituency. That is what they promise every year, right? And also, for another example can be given in the aspect of a lawyer speaking in a medical college. Like, the lawyer may not be that useful to speak in a medical college unless and until the forensic aspect is concerned. So there it matters, medical ethics, and they can speak about medical ethics. The lawyer can speak about medical ethics, forensic aspect and everything in a medical college, but the lawyer cannot be speaking about different IPCs which does not have any importance to the doctor or the doctor field or medical field. So that is where the relevance matters. And yeah, that is about the relevance. Next is feedback. Feedback is actually, we have to receive a feedback to understand if whatever we are speaking is getting registered in the person or not, right? So this becomes critical, it becomes a critical component of this communication, where the sender, we know, right, we have a sender, we have a receiver. So receiver sends what? Receiver sends the feedback. So via this feedback, the sender can calculate if the receiver understood what they um, told or not. Okay, if it was understood and received properly, that is what the feedback is mattering. Okay, so feedback can be verbal, non-verbal, and this provides an opportunity to clarify. So by via feedback, the receiver might be telling the sender to say again or to explain certain point of their message. So thereby we can adjust, we can clarify or adjust the message on the basis of feedback. Okay, so feedback becomes important in case of communication. Fine. So feedback can be in the form of idea, it can be form of response, it can be form of opinion, survey, comment, or advices, or rating and result. Rating and result is different. So these are different forms of feedback. Fine. Next, moving on to purpose of communication. So what is the purpose of communication? Communication is actually depending on the various context of context to communication. It can be different, can be about informing certain such things, it can be about persuading, instructing, entertaining, or building relationships. Fine. So it can be to get or give information. We can ask someone, when the process of asking a person about something is actually, we are trying to obtain information, right? So that is why the first one is information. Information is actually sharing the facts, data, or a knowledge. For example, let's say next the tomorrow might be a holiday for a entire college or school. So the principal is communicate or telling or sharing the facts to the students in assembly. So that is a form of information, giving information. So that is one for, that is the primary purpose of the primary purpose of communication, that is to inform. Okay, it can be conveying facts, data, knowledge, anything to the audience. Okay, so this one usually occurs where? It usually occurs in the educational setting. Yeah, educational setting, where in the cases of student teacher conversation, student is trying to teach, right? Teacher is trying to teach the student. So via that, the lecturer is trying to impart knowledge or share the information that she or he has got from the books to the students, right? So education comes, then business reports, news. Yeah, news is another major. They are sharing the information or the facts that they found in the world that day. Okay, so that is what information, the first aspect or first purpose of communication. Next important one is persuading. We are trying to persuade, like influence the attitude of the audiences or behavior. For example, politics, leadership, negotiation, marketing. Salesperson comes to our home and tries to sell something, like, so they are trying to persuade us to buy that certain object that they are advertising. So that helps, or persuading happens in case of advertising. Yeah, advertising, then it can happen in politics or marketing. Then it can even happen in case of negotiation. Okay, also in case of bargaining, like go to a shop and we try to make the seller sell it in a smaller price or a lower price. That is persuading that person though. So to do that also we need communication. So communication purpose, another one is persuading. Next is instructing, providing instructions or directions or explanations. Okay, like giving guidelines. Okay, like giving guidelines to do a thing, that is called as instructing. So these guidelines can be given to do a task. It can be given to do a task or a specific activity. Okay, so that happens where? That happens in educational institutions also, and in the workplace setting. Okay, workplace setting where the supervisor or the boss tells the person to make a ppt or make a presentation or on certain thing. And it can be even telling the students to do certain important things, like to study for certain topics so that it will be asked in the exam. So we are instructing the students to study the specific topics because it will come for the exam. So because it will come for the exam, it becomes relevant to the student, right? So that area is covered, and we're instructing, we're telling them to study, so that is instructing point, right? So that is about instructing. That is the next important point of communication, purpose of communication. Next is entertainment. Obviously entertainment is via communication itself, right? It can be via movies, it can be via arts, media, any social interaction. For example, we see stand-up comedians, right? Stand-up comedians, they are entertaining us via cracking jokes. This cracking jokes is a form of communication, verbal communication. Or it can be via movies. So movies are a form of communication, again visual communication. That again is that is for entertainment purpose, nothing else. So that is the other purpose of communication, that is entertainment. By providing amusement or relaxation, can be even relaxation. Okay, relaxation, enjoyment or amusement of the audience. Okay, where does it happen? It happens in arts, it happens in media. Okay, yeah, for example, it can even be people like to go to museums and galleries, right? Art galleries. So the painter is trying to communicate with the other people or common people via their art. So that is a form of visual communication. So that is for entertainment, or that can be for amusement or relaxation. So these are the ones. So here the major the thing is to engage the audience in pleasure. Okay, pleasurable experiences. So finally we'll get a pleasurable experiences. So that is about entertaining or entertainment. That is the next point or purpose of communication. So the last important one is building relationships. Like building relationship is a it is for building relationship, there has to be a communication. If we never spoke to our best friend the first day we met them, we would never have a if we do not speak to them, we won't maintain our relationship, or we won't be building or start building our relationship either, right? So whether it is personal or professional, if we are getting appointed to a specific place, for example, if we are getting a job in a school, or yeah, school or college, if we are not communicating with the students, the teacher student relationship will not occur only there. Okay, if we are not talking to our colleagues, or we are not communicating with our colleagues in any way, we will be um, we will not have a cordial relationship with each other, right? So to build and also to maintain relationship also, we need communication. Communication is very much essential for that. Whether it is professional or personal, communication has to be there. Through this communication, or through this communication, what happens, the person or the individual expresses their feelings, right? So expresses their feelings, and what they can share their experiences, share the experiences, and thereby what happens, connect with each other. For example, talking to friends over a cup of coffee or cup of tea, that is also communication. Thereby the bonds will be strengthened, right? So that is how the communication plays a important role in building and also maintaining relationships. Okay, so thereby how it happens is that because of all these things, the bonds will be strengthened via trust. Okay, when someone shares their important things in their life with us, we tend to trust them. Unless they trust us, they won't be sharing that details with us, right? So that is why it will create trust, understanding, and also a sense of belonging. We belong somewhere. So those things are done via communication only. There is no other method. Okay, even if we don't speak, being there for a person is also a form of communication. Okay, nowadays there is something called as people tell it as love language, right? So that is also a form of communication, non-verbal communication. Buying gifts, that is also a form of non-verbal communication. And such things help in maintaining relationships and also to build relationships. So finally we will conclude the class and remember about communication, different forms of communication: verbal, non-verbal, written, visual, and everything. We key characteristics of the communication, effective communication, how the 7 C's of communications which I mentioned, and also the purpose of communication, which is for what? To inform, to persuade, to instruct, to entertain, or to build relationships. Okay, so to help the sender craft certain messages that resonates with the audience, that is the importance of communication. Okay, so with this we have finished this session. Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe. And also there's a playlist for the whole NTT classes which have been uploaded to the channel, and you can just go and start with the first video itself, and the whole thing goes chronologically, and you will be able to complete the portions beforehand. Thank you for listening. Have a nice day.